Actors hate giving out awards. They really prefer receiving them. I didn't know, but it's a privilege to know that I'm the first actor to speak at Seaford Speech Day, and depending on how the next 7 to 9 minutes goes, I might quite possibly be the last. But thank you, Chair, governors, staff, but most of all, you lot, and wherever else you are, you magnificent students. Now, some of you may know I currently play a headmaster in a show on Netflix called Sex Education. Usually gets a whoop if my agent's in. It's fine, obviously she's not in. But it has given me a real understanding of how difficult a job being a headmaster is. I didn't really know before. I sort of took it for granted that it was pretty straightforward. Probably the hardest thing you had to figure out was the logistics on the calendar. But actually, I discovered that the hardest part of being a headmaster is, again, you lot. You are magnificent, and you are brilliant, and you are contrary, and the older ones are hormonal, and you are stubborn, which makes you really magnificent. And in fact, I think it starts from a young age, and I'm looking at you lot down there. It starts at a very young age. I was once told a rather lovely story by a friend of mine who's a headmaster who said that he was working in a school, being a headmaster, and the art teacher was called away on family business, so he, amongst many of his other jobs, had to step in and take over the art class, and this class was full of 6-year-olds. And he walked into the art class, and it was a drawing class, and so he stood up and said, lovely to see you all, why don't we just, draw anything you like, anything at all. And 19 faces looked at the headmaster completely blankly, and right at the back there was a little girl, and she immediately put her head down and started drawing furiously. And he thought, great, because normally she wasn't particularly engaged in school. So he wandered over and looked down and said to her, what are you drawing? And she said, I'm drawing a picture of God. And he said, well, nobody knows what God looks like. And she looked up and said, well, they will in a minute. I want to do a quick straw poll. I want to just do a quick show of hands. So let's say in the last week, roughly week, if you have watched a television drama, if you've read a book, if you have, even been to the opera, you flash ones amongst you, listen to a podcast, listen to a piece of music. If you can, and you could raise your hands. If you have done that in the last week, could you just raise your hand? Yeah, good. That worked. The obvious question is why? I mean, pretty much everyone has raised their hand, and if you haven't, you really need to stay in more, really. But the reason you did it was because you were looking for stories. Stories exist in a world which out there is right now pretty scary and frankly confusing and quite terrifying. We seek refuge in stories. They are hugely important to us. Not least, a lot of you probably said during COVID, I completed Netflix. It was almost a challenge. Why did we do that? Is because we were searching for stories in a very, very confusing and scary world. Stories help us understand the world in which we live. It gives emotion to the confusing things that we see around us. They give us an emotional connection to things that we may not fully understand. And more importantly, stories gather us together. Instagram stories. They're called stories for a very good reason. We whip out our phone and we show Instagram stories to the people around us. If we search for anything in life, we are searching for a community. Stories tell us where we exist in the world, and they make us feel safe. When I was young, I was asked, or I get asked now, did you always want to be an actor? I said, yeah, I did, from a very young age. And people say, oh, when did you know? And I said, well, I think I was 6 years old. Now, I think it may even be an apocryphal story. It may be even a false memory. I don't know. But we traveled a lot when I was young, and my father was in the Air Force, so we moved every 3 years. And as a young person growing up, that's quite difficult to do because you've constantly got to slot into new schools. But my mother used to get involved in amateur dramatics, and she was doing a production of Toad Hall. I remember it very clearly. She had one line as the policewoman, and she had to stand up in the dock on stage. And her line was, about Mr. Toad, he called me fat face. The entire audience laughed. I was 6 years old. I didn't really know why, but I do remember looking around and thinking, what is this alchemy? Something magical has happened. Now, the second question I also get asked is why? Why did you want to become an actor? I had no one in my family that did that, none at all. My father had no idea about acting. There was no family contacts, nothing. We knew nobody in the industry. And I haven't been able to truly, honestly answer that question. Why? Why did I want to become an actor? And why have I never considered doing anything else, despite being in an industry that is fundamentally built on rejection? I think I've sold it to you. You want to be actors out there. See me afterwards. But I've got two close friends called Paul and Lucy. Now, Paul and Lucy have been in the business for quite a long time, and Lucy asked Paul one day over a cup of tea. She said, he asked her first, he said, "Why did you want to be an actor?" And she said, "Because I love telling stories." Paul nodded. And Lucy said, "Well, why did you want to become an actor?" And Paul said, "Because I like showing off." Lucy remains an actress to this day. Paul is a psychotherapist. Go figure. So stories. Now what I think I'm asking of all of you magnificent contrary people, is you have to go out into the world and tell your story. It's really, really, really important you do that. Now school is hard. It is hard. Now for some of you, and we've witnessed some amazing achievements, and congratulations to all the award winners. I'm also going to celebrate the invisible nominees, because again, in my business, you spend an awful lot of time, if you're lucky as a nominee, wrestling an Oscar out of someone's hand is a little bit ugly. But what is so important is that all of you have a really, really important story to tell. Now, you winners who won things this afternoon, take that confidence out into the world. We need that confidence. But for those of you who didn't win a prize today, it doesn't matter. Those of you, maybe there's 3 of you that gather on a Friday late evening and play Dungeons and Dragons, and you may think you're the uncoolest people on the planet. You've been lonely, maybe, here. I'm not saying that Dungeons and Dragons is lonely. But you may feel that it's all been a bit of a struggle. You may be at school right now thinking it's kind of a little bit hard. That's okay, because your story is as valid and as important as everyone else's. Treat school as your research and development lab. You're figuring out who you are. I didn't figure out who I was until way after school, and I found school quite challenging. I was averagely academic. I love sport. I wasn't very good at it, but I found my tribe. I found my harbor in the storm in doing plays. And at an all-boys school in the that was quite hard. You had to be good at sport, but I was relieved when I went back to my school and the head of school and the captain of rugby was also playing the lead in the play, and that made my heart sing. So all of you have got an opportunity, you do, whether you are sitting on the front row there or sitting at the back. You have an opportunity, and you will have an opportunity to go out there into the world and tell your story. It's so, so important that you do that. I'll tell you why. More importantly than anything else I've said, you have a responsibility to do it. You have to do it. There's no question. Now, I've got 2 people behind me, and there's 2 people in the audience who've got a dice. Could you just roll them for me and just tell me the number that you've got? Richard, what number have you got? 3, a 4. Where's Georgie? What have you got? You've got 2 3s, a 4, a 4. 3. Okay, I'll do 1. 1. We couldn't even manage that. We couldn't organize to roll a dice and all have the same number. Of course we can't. It's impossible. It'd be highly, highly, highly unlikely. But the odds of any of us, any of you, being born into this world, get your head around this. It is the combined citizenship of Manchester, Birmingham, Edinburgh, and Liverpool, all being given a trillion-sided dice, and all of those people at exactly the same time rolling a 6. It's impossible. But those are the odds of you being on this planet. So yes, you have a responsibility to go out into the world to tell your story. Now, the opportunity that Seaford has given you means that you have another responsibility, which is to elevate others, help them tell their story. It's really important. Help each other tell your story. Now, I know it's traditional, as I kind of wrap up, to have sort of, bon mot, sort of clever things to say to you, some real nuggets that you'll take out into the world. And I thought, well, I'll try and do it slightly differently, and rather than just come up with my own pieces of mild genius, I thought I would ask some of my so-called famous acting chums what their top ones were. First one I got was say yes in life more than you say no. Good things will come from that, and that sometimes takes courage, and a lot of you will have more courage than others, and that's the way life is. Tiny, tiny, tiny yeses can make a huge difference to your life than others. If you are able to, and I'm so glad I managed to do this, find the thing that you love, and you don't have to know what it is now, and that's really important, but find the thing that you love, and then go out into the world and figure out how to use it to pay your rent. Actors, jeez. I've done 1,000 different jobs when I was just after drama school. I cleaned toilets, I sold jewels, and if I did sell you a jewel, I might have even sold some of you engagement rings. I can only apologize. But find out what it is you love to do. Keep picking up raisins. This is your incubator lab, Seaford. This is your research and development place. Find out the thing that you love to do and figure out a way to make it pay the rent. The next one I got, and I think this is really important, it's okay to say, I don't know. I don't know. Don't try and bluff an answer if you don't know the answer. I guarantee, and I'm sure there's people that work in business here that would say, actually, you garner a lot of respect if you hear someone turn around and say, I don't know. It is okay to say, I don't know. In the same way as you students now, it's okay to say, I don't know what I want to do. Honestly, I think you get asked the wrong question. Growing up, you get asked all the time, what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. Who do you want to be is the question they should be asking you. Figure that bit out first. Who do you want to be? The next bit will follow. And if some very well-meaning aunt or uncle or grandparent or boring grown-up like me turns around and says, so, what do you want to do when you grow up? Just say, I don't know, if you don't know. And if you do, aces, but you don't have to know now. Time is the currency that you have in this life. Don't waste it, but be patient. You'll find it. Do not worry. You will find it. And pay the rent. My last one is actually mine. And it's kind of personal, and yeah, okay, it's an arts-based one. And also, I'm not leaving out you mathematicians and scientists, because when it comes to stories, an algebraic equation is one of the most beautiful stories on the planet. It has a clear beginning, a middle, and an end. It's perfect. And science, if it's anything, is the search for truth. So, mathematicians and scientists, don't think you're getting away with this. Wake up. I can see you sleeping. But this is mine, and I found it in a visitor's book at the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. And I thought it was a quote by some very highfalutin artistic person, and I Googled it after the event. I couldn't find it. So I don't know who wrote it, but it was in a visitor's book at the Getty Art Museum in Los Angeles. And as I was signing my name, just to say I'd been there, just above was a quote. And the quote was, art leads to thought, thought leads to progress. If you are going into the world to tell your story, cling on to that tiny little bit. Look at a picture, read a book, look at Instagram stories. Keep embracing stories, because the art of the story will mean thought, will mean progress. Now, just to finish, when I said that I knew that I wanted to be an actor, but I didn't know why. I genuinely didn't have a true answer until Wednesday. And I mean that, I didn't. I'd been at a function in London, I was staying overnight, and I woke up at 3 a.m. going, oh my God, I've got to make a speech on Saturday. And I found this podcast that I listened to by a writer called John York, who's worked a lot in television over the many, many years. And it came back to telling stories. I became an actor, and I realized this on Wednesday, is because my job, the thing that I love to do, the thing that allows me to pay half the rent, makes me feel safe. It is where, in a way, family aside, I'm at my happiest. So keep looking, Seaford students, for that thing. You don't need to know it now. Keep looking for that thing, because it will be your harbor. It will be the place where you will feel safe. It will be the place where you will find your tribe, your gang. And that will give you the confidence to tell your story in this world. You're here, it's a miracle. The odds are staggering. One last thing, to you leavers, and this is probably the most important piece of advice I can give you. You're about to have an incredible summer, but just remember this. Nothing good happens after 2 a.m. Thank you.